gracefully, because you know it's like, no, right, you're going to be like, it's going too far. Okay. If Jack Johnson had let James Jeffries beat him on July 4th, 1910, which would have proven once and for all that a white man was 10 times better than a Negro, then black folk wouldn't have been walking around with their backs straight and chests puffed out, smiling like Cheshire cats, upsetting good, God-fearing white folk who didn't mind seeing their Negroes happy but didn't like seeing them proud. If Jack Johnson had given up and allowed James Jeffries to clip him on the chin, which would have sent him hurling down to the floor where he could have pretended to be knocked out cold, then maybe Easter Bartlett's father wouldn't have twirled his wife and daughters around the house by their pinky fingers, and his son John Bartlett Jr. wouldn't have felt for the first time in his life pleased and glad to be a black man. And if Jack Johnson had let the shouts of "kill that nigger" that rang out from the crowd unravel him, or the Nevada heat to irritate him, maybe then he would have lost the fight and things would have remained as they were. Things could have gone a different way if Jack Johnson hadn't gotten the notion some years earlier to cap his teeth in gold, so his smile added insult to injury when he was announced the victor of the fight of the century, and that glittering grin slapped white folk hard across their faces. And if John Bartlett Sr. hadn't bet on Jack Johnson to win, then he wouldn't have had the extra money to buy his wife and 2 daughters new dresses from the most expensive dress shop in town. And the older of the 2 girls, called our Elizabeth, wouldn't have let her hair down and don that brand new yellow dress that made her look like an angel. So those white boys wouldn't have noticed her, wouldn't have called out to her from across the road, wouldn't have followed her and jumped her just as she reached the bend and dragged her into the brush where they raped and beat her. If all of that hadn't happened, then Easter wouldn't have looked up to see her sister crawling home on all fours like a dog, with a bloodstain shaped like the state of Texas on the backside of our Elizabeth's dress. Easter wouldn't have bore witness to the bite marks on our Elizabeth's breasts, and wouldn't have heard the silence that streamed out of our Elizabeth's mouth when she opened it to scream. No sound at all. Because after that boy rammed his dick inside of our Elizabeth, her voice floated up into the sky, never to be heard from again, and Easter wouldn't have had to accompany John Sr. down to the sheriff's office because her mother wouldn't let him go alone, and couldn't send John Jr. because that boy hadn't unclenched his fists or his jaw since it happened, and besides, blood was swimming in his irises, and he claimed to hear it thumping in his ears, so Easter went, and then watched as her father changed from a man to a boy right before her very eyes. And if Sheriff Wiley had not forced Easter and her father to stare at the filthy soles of his boots because it had not suited him to remove his feet from atop the wooden desk, and if Wiley had looked them straight in the eye like he would have his own kind instead of watching them from beneath the shade of the wide-brimmed hat he wore, and maybe if he'd believed John Sr. when he said, "I knows it was those white boys, 'cause we found tufts of blonde and red hair clutched in our Elizabeth's hands," and Wiley had just gone out and found those boys and arrested them instead of suggesting that our Elizabeth had torn her own dress and bit her own breasts and broke her own hymen, all in order to cover up to somewhere or someone she had no place being or seeing, then maybe life for Easter would have been different.